as we have done here for the last two whole shows in a row, we're going to make this 3 shows in a row. We're going to head towards 32 teams in 32 shows. Look at that football just shred into nothingness.
32 teams in maybe 32 shows.
I think we're going to be like, 32 teams in like 19 shows. We'll
Probably.
double up some days or something like that, Jeff. But we're going to talk the Las Vegas Raiders here on a Wednesday. 10-7 last year, second in the AFC West, made the playoffs for the first time since 2016. Lost to Cincinnati in the wild card round. Gruden had to resign on October the 11th. All kinds of nonsense going on there, as you mentioned. Had to go with a special teams coach to take over the rest of the season. Decided not to retain him. We're going to get Josh McDaniels come in, be the head coach. Mick Lombardi at offensive coordinator. Patrick Graham at defensive coordinator. 6th in passing yards, 28th in rushing yards, 31st in penalties for this team. But, Jeff, the real thing here is in comes Devontae Adams, extend Hunter Renfrow, sign Chandler Jones, sign Bilal Nichols. You have now a team that looks much better on the offensive side of the ball when you add a true number 1 receiver in there, a team now with one of the better pass rushes. Now, the interior defensive line, that's something we'll talk about a little bit later, but you add Chandler Jones to go along with Max Crosby, gives you one of the best pass rushing duos there is in all the NFL. I think that this Raiders team, and look, this is the division from hell. There's no doubt about it. Like, there's going to be one of the 4 teams is going to disappoint. I don't know which team it's going to be, but I don't know, man. I don't think it's going to be the Raiders. I'm like you. I'm while I like the Chargers better, I'm pretty bullish on the Raiders as well.
To me, they're the 3rd best team in this division, which could very easily make you the 3rd best team in the AFC this year. Now, I don't think they'll end up being better than Buffalo, but that's just how good this AFC West is. And you look at the Raiders offseason, everyone points to Devontae Adams, and properly so. He's a top 2 wide receiver in this league. But everyone seems to be forgetting the Chandler Jones signing.
Yeah.
And that is a humongous deal to put an elite pass rusher on the opposite side of Max Crosby. Now, no disrespect to Ngakoue, who still can play, and I think will have a pretty nice impact in Indianapolis. But you're talking about Chandler Jones, when he is healthy, is a legitimate top 5 pass rusher in the league. I don't care that they have to play a second-place schedule as opposed to a last-place schedule for Denver, which is a part of the reason that on top of the Russell Wilson trade, that a lot of people like Denver's, their schedule's much more favorable than Las Vegas's schedule. But, Matt, this team is good.
Yeah.
And if they were in any other division in the AFC, they would win the AFC South easily. I would probably pick them to win the AFC North, and they would be a strong second to Buffalo in the AFC East.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And if you take a look at what they lost, I mean, it is certainly far less of an impact than what they gained.
100%.
Zay Jones leaves for one of the most ridiculous contracts I've heard of in a long time.
Great contract.
Yes,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Marcus Mariota did leave, and listen, that is to not have a backup that you feel like you could go in and win games with, I think is certainly something, right? I mean, it's not nothing. And to have a Marcus Mariota certainly is that warm little fuzzy feeling to know that you've got him standing on the sideline should anything happen to Carr. He obviously out of town, going to be starting in Atlanta. And then Casey Hayward gone from the secondary there. They did make some strides in the secondary last year. A lot has to do with Casey Hayward playing much, much better for them. So they will have to pick that up there. On the draft side of things, of course, didn't have a first-round pick, didn't have a second-round pick, so didn't make a pick until the 3rd round, in which they picked up Dylan Parham, offensive guard, which is likely going to step in and start for them this year. In the 4th round, they picked up Zamir White, a running back. They picked up Neil Farrell out of LSU at defensive tackle in the 4th round as well. And then Matthew Butler, another defensive tackle, in the 5th round. So you can kind of see, the first, second round talent, not able to get any of that because they had to get rid of those. They come in, they get an offensive lineman that they felt, I think, that they knew might have to step in and start from day one, even though he is a 3rd round rookie. And the way things are kind of panning out right now, Jeff, they're probably going to have to do that. And so if there are any kind of question marks about this team, I do think maybe the offensive line in general would be it, right? I mean, if you look at Pro Football Focus, they have them ranked 29th in the NFL heading into the 2022 season as far as offensive linemen, as far as the offensive lines as a unit goes, like right now, the projected starting five in Colton Miller, Denzel Good, Andre James, Dylan Parham, again, that rookie right there, Alex Leatherwood over at right tackle. Leatherwood has to move over. He was playing guard last year for them. He moves over to right tackle for them. He underperformed for them as well. And so you just kind of get this offensive line that none of the names jump off the page at you. And if there was anything that might end up, let's not say cratering this team, but maybe holding them back from their true potential, it might be the offensive line.
No, and it's the wrong division to have a bad offensive line in, because you're dealing with the Chargers, who now have, if Khalil Mack is healthy, have arguably two of the five best defensive pass rushers in the game, and Mack is healthy, with Bosa on the other side. If Denver can ever get Bradley Chubb to realize his potential on the other side of Randy Gregory, that's pretty darn good too. And then Kansas City, it all depends on what you're getting out of Clark. But you're in a scenario where you're dealing with pass rushes against you that are really good. And then again, that's part of the reason that I think the Chandler Jones thing for Vegas has really been swept under the rug a lot more than it should be, because, okay, I just mentioned a few good pass rushes. I would take Vegas's pass rush over Denver's, over Kansas City's, and it is pretty darn close to what the Chargers now bring with Mack on the other side of Bosa.
Absolutely. And arguably,
you could argue Vegas is better.
I was going to say, if all things being equal, with both sides being healthy, I would, like you said,
you can argue it.
It's
close. And look, when you're dealing with the prices that you're seeing in this division, you are asking the Raiders just to go over 500 to go over their win total.
Yeah.
You are asking the Raiders in a division where everyone else is minus money to make the playoffs, a plus 160 on a team that was, again, I understand why some think they're going to regress. Won a lot of close games last year. And usually when that happens, you regress because you don't have the same luck in close games. But I would argue you are dealing with a team last year that I thought going into the year was going to be a 7 or 6 win team. And now on paper, you're dealing with a team that is a 10-win team on paper.
Yeah, if you look, and as you mentioned, so if we talk about these odds for the Raiders, plus 650 to win the division. 8.5 is their win total on the season. Yes, plus 160 to make the playoffs. No, minus 200 to make the playoffs. 20-1 to win the AFC, and then 40-1 to win the Super Bowl. We'll go through what Pro Football Focus thinks of the rest of the rest of the units, the defensive side of the ball, the secondary, the receiving core, where those rank, as well as the schedule strength for next year for this team, which could be another thing if you're looking at maybe trying to fade the Raiders. That would be another deal. And listen, some other strengths for this team outside of the pass rush. We'll talk about that as well as we continue. 32 teams in 32 shows? Question mark. All right, so back to the Raiders here. And as we go over, we look at last season. Football Outsiders had them as the 19th rated offense DVOA. They were the 17th defense DVOA and the 21st special teams DVOA. So that a little bit below average, but, offense, defense, kind of middle of the pack, right? Like kind of middling offenses and defenses when we get there. You could only think that the offense is going to be better this year. The defense, they've at least added some pieces. You would think that would be better. So, if you're talking now, moving from being middle of the pack to more kind of in the upper half of the league, upper 12, like you're talking about, which is, listen, as long as if you're inside the upper 12, you're doing good, in the NFL, in any of these units. So you expect that these teams could be better from that standpoint. Now, the only thing is, and as you mentioned, we're about to flash it up on the screen right now if you're watching us on video, is the schedule. It is, according to Warren Sharp over at Sharp Football, the third toughest schedule in all of the NFL in 2022. The win total line is set at 8.5. Sharp Football has them projected at 8.5 wins, so it has them right on the number that it's set right now. And a lot of that has to do with, one, like we just mentioned, the division of hell, but also, as you mentioned, Jeff, like it is so backloaded outside of this Steelers game right here, but it goes Chargers, Rams, Patriots, throw the Steelers in there, Niners, Chiefs to close out the season. So outside of the Steelers, and listen, by then, we're talking week 16, maybe by then the Steelers have figured something out, right? Maybe Mitch Trubisky is is what they've been
He's
looking
good.
for. Yeah. I mean, maybe that's what they've been looking for, and they're good all season long or whatever it might be. So it's the back half of the schedule here where you start to look at it and say, oh, man, this is not a great way to end for sure. I mean, it's soft there in the middle where you do get the Texans and the Jags, and you get maybe the Broncos won't be as good. Maybe the Saints won't be as good as people think or something like that. But we know the Seahawks won't be very good. So the middle certainly lightens up, but the front and the back are rough.
Yeah, it's pretty funny with the way that our graphic is at VSiN.com.
Yeah.
The first column of the first 6 weeks, at Chargers, Cardinals, at Titans, Broncos, at Chiefs, is a disaster.
Yeah.
It's brutal, those first 5 games. And you mentioned the back 6, which are very difficult. And then, look, in the middle 6, that Texans at New Orleans, at Jacksonville, Indy at Denver, at Seattle. If you're a playoff team, Matt, you're a playoff team, you go 5-1 in that stretch. Because you get, even though, yes, you have to go to New Orleans and go to Seattle, which are historically difficult places to play, the Raiders roster, to me, is significantly better than Seattle, and they are better than New Orleans on paper. So if you're a playoff team, you go on the road in those games, you beat Jacksonville, you beat Indianapolis and Houston at home, and then if you lose the divisional game at Denver, so what at that point? But that's also an obtainable game. Again, I'm not as high on Denver as a lot of people seem to be going into this year, but if you're the Raiders, those 2 Denver games, week 4, week 11, the results of those 2 games are probably going to tell the tale of this season.
And 7-12, as you mentioned, week 7-12 is also going to be the key to you getting your over if you bet an over bet or whether if you bet the under, whether the under is going to hold or not, because they're going to have to come out of that stretch there, Kelley, 7-12. With definitely a winning record, most likely, like Jeff said, a very good winning record out of that stretch. Because, listen, it's too much to ask of this team in this first stretch, in this home stretch, to just dominate those stretches. It's just any team is going to get knocked off somewhere along the way because that's just a brutal way to begin, a brutal way to end. So that middle stretch really is going to be the key to getting over this 8.5.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think when I see schedules like this that end up lining up this way, I mean, what immediately jumps out to me is if you're someone out there who does like the Raiders this season, but you're looking for even longer numbers than what they're at, it might just be wait till the bye week. Don't force anything now. Wait till they see how those first 5 games. Yeah, you might have missed your opportunity if they end up going 4-1 or 5-0 in that time, and they're really that good. But there's a chance they go 2-3 or 3-2 or whatever, and they're not out of it by any means, and you could get much better odds than what you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean that could be, like you said, maybe you even do if you were going to bet 1 unit, maybe you half up front and then half on the half on the back, to where, like you said, you don't totally miss the boat in case they do just come out and dominate. But you keep one in the chamber there for taking advantage of what should be the better stretch of the season for them. And as you mentioned, you could get on a much better odds for them. Now, if we look at Pro Football Focus, I don't agree with ESPN on this at all. Like they have this roster ranked 21st in the NFL. Yeah, they have this roster ranked 21st heading into the season. I disagree with that. I just don't. I mean, I understand the interior of the defense it leaves a little bit to be desired. We talked about the offensive line as well. That maybe is going to need to take a step up. But I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that there are 20 other teams with better rosters than this team. So. Over on Pro Football Focus, they had them as the 19th graded offense last season, the 20th graded defense. That said, heading into this season, they have bumped them up by the additions that they've made. They have them power ranked 16th overall, so kind of dead center in the middle of the NFL. 19th ranked defensive line heading into 2022, and that mainly has to do I read this, and the caveat was the outside is as strong as anything, the inside is almost as weak as anything. Now, could they get some growth there on the inside? They did go out and make some signings. There is that as well, but we're going to need to see that. 5th ranked receiving core, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Whenever you have a guy that runs every single route that you need in Devontae Adams, you have the ultimate kind of move the chains guy in Hunter Renfrow, and then you have Darren Waller at the tight end position to go along with, whatever. If we want to call Demarcus Robinson signing something, cool, I guess, but if we're looking at strengths on this team, we talked about the weaknesses, right? And maybe the offensive line being that, and maybe, we'll talk about the secondary here in a second, but if we look at strengths, obviously we talked about the pass rush being a strength. The pass catchers is a huge strength.
Oh, well, of course. I mean, again, I mentioned it before. You have a top 2 wide receiver now, and you have Darren Waller, who I think everyone has just kind of forgotten how good Waller is when he's healthy because of the injuries he dealt with last year. Now that you're dealing with Kittle and Kelsey, and those are the only 2 guys that I would even consider taking over Waller. Kittle, I would hesitate at this point. Kelsey's obviously the best tight end in the world at this point. But look, it is a valid point to criticize the interior of both sides of the ball for this team, because you mentioned it before, all those questions on the interior for the O-line, and that can be a problem, obviously. The one thing is, if you're if you're outside of the line, if your tackles can hold up against those elite pass rushers in your division, it's okay if your interior is a little bit weaker.
And Carr's savvy enough to be able to understand that as well, right?
Correct. And look, we might see the one concern that I have with the Raiders, if the O-line does crumble, is will we see Derek Carr go back to captain check down that we saw earlier in his career when he was looked at as an average to a below average starter in the league. And if that happens, that is the one thing that could really derail a potentially good season for the Raiders.
The other thing that I kind of listed as a strength for this team, and people might chuckle whenever I say this, but just, odds are you're going to have far fewer off the field distractions this year, and the team can actually just focus on playing football. I mean, so we talked about the Gruden stuff already, but remember the Henry Ruggs stuff, right? And so, not only did they deal with the Gruden stuff, they dealt with the Ruggs stuff as well. So, 2 massive off-the-field things that this team had to deal with that didn't have anything to do with them playing football on the field. And you would like to think that there's not going to be another one of these type things happen to them over the course of this season. That has to be a plus for this team. I actually listed that as a strength that, hey, look, they can actually just focus on playing football this year. I think the other thing, maybe if we do want to look at another weakness on this thing, is maybe that secondary if they don't take a step forward. Trayvon Mullen is a guy entering his 4th season here, coming off some injuries in year 3. Really going to have to step up for them. Rock Ya-Sin, another guy that really needs to play better for them. And then Jonathan Abram has never lived up to the hype since he's been in Vegas as well. And he really can be a guy that, if he can play like he did more in college, can certainly be a difference maker. So all in all, division from hell, we agree on that. Tough front end, tough back end of the schedule. Should be able to take advantage of that middle. I can see them making the playoffs again here, Jeff. And certainly if things go on the right side of variance, I can see this team making a run in the playoffs as well.
Won't win the division, but they are a very strong 2nd or 3rd place team. 5th or 6th in the AFC, depending on where they finish in this division, Matt. Definitely capable of winning a playoff game or 2.